The engine sputtered once, twice, then died completely, leaving Lucy Henderson stranded on a deserted stretch of highway with nothing but tumbleweeds and her rapidly fraying patience for company. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered, slamming her palms against the steering wheel of her ancient Honda Civic. The car had been making concerning noises for the last 50 miles, but she had foolishly hoped it would limp along just a little farther. Hope, apparently, was not a reliable mechanic. Lucy grabbed her phone from the cup holder, already knowing what she would find. No signal. Of course there was no signal. This entire road trip had been cursed from the beginning. What was supposed to be a scenic drive from Phoenix to San Francisco for her best friend's wedding had turned into a disaster of epic proportions. First, her traveling companion had backed out last minute due to a family emergency. Then her carefully planned route had been detoured due to road construction. And now this. She stepped out of the car into the blistering afternoon heat, shielding her eyes as she surveyed the empty landscape. Nothing but scrubland and asphalt stretching in both directions. She had not passed another car in at least 20 minutes. The realization of how vulnerable she was hit her all at once, and she felt her throat tighten with anxiety. Lucy was 26, a kindergarten teacher from Tucson who had never been particularly adventurous. She preferred her cozy apartment, her predictable routine, and her low-stakes existence. This road trip had been her attempt to prove to herself that she could be spontaneous, that she could handle the unexpected. The universe was clearly laughing at her presumption. She popped the hood of her car and stared at the engine as if looking at it would somehow reveal the problem. It did not. She knew absolutely nothing about cars beyond where to put the gas and how to change the radio station. "Perfect," she said to no one. "Just perfect." Lucy walked to the edge of the road, hoping to at least get a phone signal if she held her device high enough. She must have looked ridiculous, a petite woman in denim shorts and a tank top, arms stretched toward the sky like she was trying to touch the clouds. Still no bars. The heat was oppressive, the kind that made the air shimmer and turned breathing into work. She retreated to the slim shadow cast by her car and tried to think rationally. Someone would come along eventually. This was a highway, not a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. She had water in her car, and she was not that far from civilization. She would be fine. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Lucy was beginning to seriously reconsider her assessment of the situation when she finally heard the distant rumble of an engine. She scrambled to her feet, relief flooding through her as a sleek black SUV appeared on the horizon. She stepped closer to the road, waving her arms to flag down the vehicle. For a moment, she worried it might just blow past her, but the SUV began to slow, eventually pulling onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of her car. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. Lucy's first thought was that he looked nothing like the kind of stranger she had been taught to fear. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair, and the kind of build that suggested he spent regular time in a gym. He wore dark jeans and a gray t-shirt that probably cost more than her entire outfit, and even from a distance, she could see the concern on his face. "Car trouble," he called out, walking toward her. "That obvious?" Lucy tried for humor, but her voice came out shaky. She was acutely aware that she was alone in the middle of nowhere with a complete stranger, and every cautionary tale her mother had ever told her was suddenly playing in her mind. He stopped a respectful distance away, seeming to sense her wariness. Up close, he was even more striking, with sharp features and eyes so dark they were almost black. "I'm Xavier," he said. "Xavier Hayes. Are you okay?" "Lucy," she replied automatically. "Lucy Henderson. And I'm fine, just my car is very much not fine. It died about 40 minutes ago." Xavier glanced at her Honda, then back at her. Have you called for a tow truck? No signal. She held up her phone as evidence. He pulled out his own phone, checked it, and frowned. I don't have service either. The nearest town is probably another 30 miles up the road. I can give you a lift there, and we can call for a tow truck once we have service. Lucy hesitated. Every instinct told her not to get into a car with a stranger, but what were her alternatives? Wait in the scorching heat for another car that might not come. She studied Xavier's face, looking for any sign of danger, but all she saw was genuine concern. I promise I'm not a serial killer, Xavier said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Though I suppose that's exactly what a serial killer would say. Despite herself, Lucy laughed. That's not reassuring. I have a younger sister about your age. I'd want someone to help her if she were stranded. He pulled out his wallet and showed her his driver's license. Here, take a picture of this and my license plate. That way, if I do turn out to be a serial killer, you'll have evidence. The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful that Lucy felt some of her anxiety ease. She took the pictures, not because she really thought she would need them, but because it seemed like the smart thing to do. Xavier waited patiently, not pressuring her. Okay, she finally said. Thank you, I really appreciate this. Grab whatever you need from your car, we'll get it sorted out. Lucy retrieved her purse, overnight bag, and a tote filled with snacks for the drive. Xavier helped her carry everything to his SUV, and she could not help but notice how expensive it was. The interior was all leather and high-tech displays, the kind of vehicle that cost more than she made in a year. As they pulled back onto the highway, Lucy felt herself beginning to relax slightly. Xavier drove with easy confidence, one hand on the wheel, his posture relaxed. He did not immediately try to make conversation, which she appreciated. She needed a moment to process the fact that her entire day had just been derailed. So, where were you headed? Xavier eventually asked. San Francisco. My best friend is getting married this weekend. That's a long drive from wherever you started. Tucson. I thought it would be fun to drive instead of fly, see some of the country. She laughed without humor. Clearly, I'm not great at spontaneous adventures. Everyone has car trouble eventually, not your fault, I guess. Lucy glanced over at him. What about you? Where are you headed? I was in Las Vegas for business. Heading back to San Francisco, actually. Small world. They fell into silence again, but it felt comfortable rather than awkward. Lucy watched the landscape roll by, identical stretches of scrubland punctuated by the occasional rock formation. The air conditioning in Xavier's SUV was blissfully cold, and she found herself feeling drowsy after the stress of the afternoon. There's water in the back if you're thirsty, Xavier said. Lucy twisted around and found a small cooler tucked behind the passenger seat. She grabbed a bottle, the cold plastic feeling like heaven in her hands. Want one? Sure, thanks. She opened his bottle and handed it to him, their fingers brushing briefly. She tried not to think about how that tiny contact sent an unexpected spark through her system. He was just a stranger giving her a ride. There was no reason for her pulse to quicken. As they drove, they began to talk more. Xavier asked about her work, and she found herself telling him about her kindergartners, about how exhausting and rewarding it was to spend her days with tiny humans who were just beginning to understand the world. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention. What about you? Lucy asked. What kind of business were you in Vegas for? I own a chain of luxury hotels, Xavier said, his tone casual as if he were discussing the weather. I was meeting with potential investors for a new property. Lucy blinked. You own hotels, like multiple hotels, 15 actually, Up and down the West Coast, a few in Nevada and Arizona. Oh, she processed this information, suddenly very aware of the difference between them. He owned 15 hotels, and she rented a one-bedroom apartment and drove a car that had just died on the highway. So you're like rich. Xavier laughed, a genuine sound that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. I do all right. That's one way to put it. Lucy felt suddenly self-conscious. What was a guy like him thinking, picking up a stranded schoolteacher on the side of the road? She probably looked like a disaster, wind-blown and sweaty from standing in the heat. It's just money, Xavier said, as if reading her thoughts. Doesn't make me any different from anyone else. I think most people who don't have money would disagree with that. Fair point. He glanced over at her, his expression thoughtful. But seriously, it's not that big a deal. I work hard, I was lucky, and I had some good opportunities. That's all. They reached a small town just as the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Xavier pulled into a gas station, and Lucy immediately checked her phone. 2 bars of service appeared, and she nearly cried with relief. I'll call for a tow truck, she said, already dialing. The conversation that followed was frustrating and disheartening. The tow truck could come get her car, but not until the next morning. The mechanic would not be able to look at it until the day after that. And given that it was a Friday evening, she probably would not have answers until Monday at the earliest. Lucy hung up and pressed her forehead against the passenger window, trying not to panic. The wedding was tomorrow evening. She was supposed to be there for the rehearsal dinner tonight. There was no way she was making either event now. What did they say? Xavier asked gently. She explained the situation, her voice tight with frustration. I don't know what to do. I can't miss this wedding. Emma would be so disappointed, and I'm supposed to be a bridesmaid. I need to get to San Francisco tonight. I can take you. Lucy turned to stare at him. What? No, you've already done so much. I can't ask you to drive me all the way to San Francisco. You're not asking, I'm offering. I'm going there anyway. He shrugged as if it were the simplest thing in the world. We can have the tow truck take your car to a shop here, and you can deal with it after the wedding. Come on, let's get back on the road. Xavier, that's insane. It's got to be at least another 6 or 7 hours of driving. 6.5, probably. We'll get there around 1 in the morning. He smiled at her, and something in that smile made her chest feel tight. Unless you have a better plan, she did not. The only alternative was to rent a car which she could not afford, or to miss the wedding entirely. Lucy looked at this stranger who had already gone out of his way to help her, who was now offering to completely rearrange his evening for someone he had met an hour ago. Why are you being so nice to me? The question came out before she could stop it. Xavier was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. Honestly, I don't know. You seem like a good person who's having a really bad day, and I'm in a position to help. Why wouldn't I? It was such a simple answer, but it made Lucy's throat feel tight. When was the last time someone had helped her without expecting anything in return? She could not remember. Okay, she said quietly. If you're really sure, I would be incredibly grateful. I'm sure. Now come on, let's get you to that wedding. They stopped long enough for Xavier to fill up his gas tank and for Lucy to use the restroom. When she came back out, she found him waiting with a bag full of snacks and 2 large coffees. Figured we'd need fuel for the drive, he said, handing her one of the cups. Back on the highway, the conversation flowed more easily. Lucy found herself telling Xavier things she normally would not share with strangers, about how she had always been the cautious one, the friend who played it safe. How this road trip was supposed to be her stepping outside her comfort zone. I'd say having your car break down and accepting a ride from a stranger definitely qualifies as outside your comfort zone, Xavier said. True, though not exactly the adventure I had in mind. The best adventures are usually the ones we don't plan. As darkness fell and the highway stretched endlessly before them, Lucy found herself studying Xavier's profile in the glow of the dashboard lights. She still knew almost nothing about him beyond the basic facts, but there was something about him that made her feel safe. Maybe it was the way he had never once made her feel pressured or uncomfortable. Maybe it was the genuine kindness in his eyes, or maybe she was just delirious from the stress of the day. They stopped for dinner at a small diner off the highway around 9. Lucy was starving, having eaten nothing but the granola bars from her car since lunch. They slid into a booth, and she ordered a burger and fries without even looking at the menu. So tell me more about these hotels, Lucy said after the waitress had taken their orders. How does someone end up owning 15 hotels by their early 30s? Xavier leaned back in his seat. My grandfather owned a small motel in Sacramento. Nothing fancy, but it was successful. When he died, he left it to me instead of my parents. I was 23, had just graduated from business school, and had all these ideas about how to modernize it. It did well, so I bought another property, then another. I got lucky with some real estate deals, made some good investments, and here we are. That's not luck, that's skill and hard work. He ducked his head, looking almost embarrassed. I guess. But I had advantages too. My family wasn't poor, I got a good education, had people who believed in me. Not everyone gets those chances. Lucy liked that he acknowledged his privilege rather than pretending he was entirely self-made. It spoke to a self-awareness that many wealthy people seem to lack. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Lucy was acutely aware of how surreal this entire situation was. This morning, she had been alone in her car, singing along to the radio. Now she was having dinner with a hotel mogul who looked like he belonged in a cologne advertisement. Can I ask you something? Xavier said, his tone suddenly more serious. Sure. Are you seeing anyone? The question caught her off guard, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. No. Why? Just curious. Seemed like an important wedding for someone to travel alone. My friend Sarah was supposed to come with me, but her dad had a health scare and she needed to stay home. And no, I'm not seeing anyone. Haven't really dated much in the past year or so. Why not? Lucy shrugged, stirring her straw through her soda. I don't know. The guys I meet are either boring or wrong for me. I teach elementary school, so I'm not exactly surrounded by eligible bachelors, and dating apps feel so impersonal. I get that. What about you? I assume hotel moguls have women lining up. Xavier laughed. You'd be surprised. Or maybe you wouldn't. A lot of women are more interested in the money than in me. It gets old. That must be hard. Lucy meant it sincerely. She could not imagine constantly wondering if people liked you for yourself or for what you could give them. It is, he admitted. But that's not really something I can complain about, is it? Oh no, I'm rich and women find me attractive. What a tragedy. Feelings are valid regardless of circumstances, Lucy said firmly. Just because you have money doesn't mean you're not allowed to want genuine connection. Xavier looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're pretty wise for a kindergarten teacher. Kindergartners teach you a lot about human nature. They're honest in a way adults aren't. They lingered at the diner longer than necessary, neither seeming eager to get back on the road despite the hours still ahead of them. Lucy learned that Xavier had a younger sister named Natalie who was in medical school, that his parents were retired and living in Portland, that he played basketball on weekends with a group of friends. He was funny and self-deprecating, quick to laugh at himself. When they finally returned to the SUV, Lucy felt more relaxed than she had in months. There was something about Xavier that made her feel like she could be herself. No pretenses or carefully maintained walls. The miles disappeared beneath them as they drove through the night. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversation ranging from childhood memories to philosophical debates about whether hot dogs were sandwiches. Lucy could not remember the last time she had enjoyed someone's company this much. Around midnight, Xavier merged onto the highway that would take them into San Francisco. The city lights glowed in the distance, beautiful and welcoming after hours of darkness. "Where am I taking you?" Xavier asked. Lucy rattled off the address of her hotel, a modest place near Union Square that she had booked months ago. Xavier programmed it into his GPS, and Lucy felt a strange pang of disappointment. Their time together was almost over. In a few minutes, she would never see him again. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. You really saved me today. It was my pleasure." He glanced over at her. "And I mean that. This was the best drive from Vegas I've ever had. Even better than driving alone in complete silence, especially better than that." They pulled up to her hotel just after 1 in the morning. Xavier insisted on helping her with her bags, carrying them into the lobby despite her protests. They stood there in the bright fluorescent light, suddenly awkward with each other now that their journey had ended. "Well," Lucy said, searching for the right words, "I guess this is goodbye." Xavier reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "This has my number. Call me after the wedding, let me know how it goes. And if you need any help with your car situation, I have connections with some good mechanics." Lucy took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. "I will. Thank you again, Xavier. Really." He smiled at her and she felt that spark again, stronger this time. "Get some sleep. You've got a big day tomorrow." "You too." Xavier turned to leave, and Lucy felt panic rise in her chest. She did not want him to go. This stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and made her feel more alive in one evening than she had felt in months. She opened her mouth to call him back, but no words came out. He paused at the door, looking back at her. For a moment their eyes met, and Lucy could have sworn she saw the same reluctance in his expression. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. Lucy stood in the empty lobby, clutching his business card like a lifeline. She had his number. She could call him. But what would she say? "Thank you for the ride" seemed inadequate. "I can't stop thinking about you" seemed insane after knowing him for less than 12 hours. She checked into her room and collapsed onto the bed, too tired to even change clothes. Her phone buzzed with messages from Emma, asking where she was. Lucy sent a quick text explaining the car situation and promising to be at the wedding tomorrow. Then she stared at Xavier's business card for a long time before finally setting it on the nightstand and turning off the light. Sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Xavier's face, heard his laugh, remembered the way he had looked at her in the diner. She barely knew him, and yet somehow he had managed to turn her entire world upside down. The next morning arrived far too early. Lucy dragged herself out of bed and into the shower, grateful that she had packed her bridesmaid dress and makeup in the bag she had grabbed from her car. The wedding was at 5, which gave her most of the day to pull herself together. She met Emma for a late breakfast, and her best friend immediately noticed something was different. "You look weird," Emma said, studying her across the table at their brunch spot. "Thanks, you look beautiful too." "No, I mean you have this look. What happened?" Lucy told her the entire story, from the car breaking down to Xavier driving her all the way to San Francisco. Emma listened with wide eyes, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations. "Let me get this straight," Emma said when Lucy had finished. "A gorgeous millionaire gave you a ride, spent hours talking to you, and then gave you his number. It wasn't like that. He was just being nice. Lucy, men don't drive 7 hours out of their way just to be nice. He likes you. He doesn't even know me. He spent the entire evening getting to know you. Did he seem interested? Did you guys have chemistry? Lucy thought about the easy conversation, the way Xavier had looked at her, the reluctance she had felt when they said goodbye. Maybe. I don't know. It all happened so fast. Are you going to call him? I don't know. Probably not. What would be the point? He's a millionaire hotel owner and I'm a kindergarten teacher from Tucson. We live in completely different worlds. Emma reached across the table and grabbed Lucy's hand. Stop talking yourself out of something before it even has a chance to begin. Call him. At least thank him properly. Maybe after the wedding. No, right now. Emma, you're getting married in like 6 hours. I'm not calling a guy right now. Fine, but promise me you'll do it soon. This could be something special, Lucy. Don't let it slip away because you're scared. Lucy promised, though she was not sure she meant it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of wedding preparations. She helped Emma get ready, fixed her veil, held her hand when she started crying happy tears. The ceremony was beautiful, held in a historic venue with views of the bay. Lucy stood beside her best friend and tried to focus on the moment, but her mind kept wandering to Xavier. At the reception, Lucy found herself scanning the crowd, a ridiculous part of her hoping to somehow spot him among the guests, which was insane, because why would he be at a wedding he was not invited to? She drank champagne and danced and made small talk with relatives, but her heart was not in it. Around 10, she stepped outside for some air. The terrace overlooked the city, lights twinkling like stars. She pulled out her phone and found herself staring at Xavier's contact information. Emma was right. She should at least thank him properly. But texting seemed impersonal and calling seemed too forward. While she was debating, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer, but something made her swipe to accept the call. Hello, Lucy, it's Xavier. Her heart started pounding. Xavier, hi, how did you get my number? You took a picture of my license, remember? Your number showed up when you texted me the photo. I hope it's okay that I called. It's fine. It's good. I was actually just thinking about calling you. Yeah, she could hear the smile in his voice. How was the wedding? Beautiful. Emotional. Everything a wedding should be. I'm glad you made it. They talked for a few minutes, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in the car. Lucy found herself smiling, her earlier melancholy evaporating. Listen, Xavier said, his tone becoming more serious. I know this is probably crazy, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since last night. I was wondering if you might want to have dinner with me tomorrow. I know you're probably heading back to Tucson soon, but if you have time before you leave, I'd really like to see you again. Lucy's breath caught. I'd like that too, but I don't know when I can get back to Tucson. My car is still broken down in the middle of nowhere. I've been thinking about that. What if I sent someone to pick up your car and have it transported to a shop here in San Francisco? That way you could stay a few extra days and we could spend some time together. I'd cover all the costs, of course. Xavier, I can't let you do that. That's too much. Please, I want to. And honestly, I can afford it without even noticing the expense. Let me do this. Lucy knew she should say no. It was too much, too fast, too generous from someone who barely knew her. But the thought of going home tomorrow, of never seeing Xavier again, made her chest ache. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, thank you. Great. I'll make the arrangements tonight. Can I pick you up tomorrow at noon? I'll be ready. After they hung up, Lucy stood on the terrace for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. She was staying in San Francisco. She was going to see Xavier again. This was either the beginning of something wonderful or the worst decision she had ever made. Emma found her a few minutes later. "Why do you look like you just got hit by lightning?" Xavier called. "He wants to have dinner tomorrow. He's having my car brought here so I can stay longer." Emma squealed so loudly that several guests turned to stare. "This is amazing. This is like a fairy tale, or a disaster waiting to happen. Stop being so negative. Let yourself be happy for once. Let yourself take a risk." Lucy nodded, but her stomach was churning with anxiety and excitement. She was not the kind of person who took risks. She was not the kind of person who had whirlwind romances with millionaires. But maybe Emma was right. Maybe it was time to step out of her comfort zone for real this time. The next day, Lucy changed outfits 4 times before Xavier arrived. She finally settled on a sundress and sandals, casual but pretty. When the front desk called to say someone was there for her, her hands were shaking. Xavier was waiting in the lobby, looking unfairly handsome in dark jeans and a button-down shirt. His face lit up when he saw her, and Lucy felt her anxiety begin to melt away. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thanks. You look pretty good yourself." He had planned an entire day for them. First, they drove across the Golden Gate Bridge, the bay sparkling beneath them. Then lunch at a small restaurant in Sausalito, where they sat outside and watched the boats drift by. Every moment felt magical, like she had stepped into someone else's life. "I have to confess something," Xavier said as they walked along the waterfront after lunch. "I've been thinking about you constantly since Friday night. I know that probably sounds insane." "It doesn't sound insane. I've been thinking about you too." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I don't usually do this. I don't usually meet someone and feel this immediate connection. But there's something about you, Lucy. You're genuine and funny and kind, and I can't seem to get you out of my head." Lucy's heart was racing. "I feel the same way, which terrifies me, honestly. We barely know each other. So let's fix that. Stay for a week. Let me show you the city. Let me take you to dinner. Let me get to know you properly. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people spending time together and seeing what happens." Every logical part of Lucy's brain was screaming at her to say no. She had responsibilities, a job to get back to, a life in Tucson. But when she looked at Xavier, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, all of that seemed distant and unimportant. "Okay," she said. "1 week." Xavier's smile was brilliant. He reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and Lucy felt a jolt of electricity at the contact. They spent the rest of the day exploring the city. Xavier took her to his favorite spots, places tourists never saw. A tiny bookstore in the Mission, a hidden garden in Pacific Heights, a coffee shop that served the best lattes she had ever tasted. He was attentive and funny, constantly making her laugh, and Lucy found herself falling a little more with each passing hour. That evening, he took her to dinner at an upscale restaurant with views of the city skyline. Lucy felt out of place among the wealthy clientele, but Xavier never made her feel less than. He treated her like she was the only person in the room. "Tell me more about your students," he said over dessert. "What's the best part about teaching kindergarten?" Lucy thought for a moment. "The honesty, I think. Kids that age haven't learned to filter themselves yet. They say exactly what they're thinking, and there's something refreshing about that. Plus, they're at this age where everything is new and exciting. They get thrilled about things adults take for granted. It reminds me to appreciate the small stuff. You must be a great teacher." "I try. Some days are better than others." She paused, then asked, "What about you? What's the best part about what you do, creating spaces where people make memories?" "I know that sounds cheesy, but hotels are where people celebrate anniversaries, where families take vacations, where business deals get made. I like being part of that, providing a place where life happens." "That's not cheesy. That's lovely." They lingered over dinner until the restaurant started to empty. Xavier drove her back to her hotel, and they sat in his SUV in the parking garage, neither wanting the evening to end. "Can I see you tomorrow?" Xavier asked. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." He leaned across the console and kissed her cheek, a soft, brief touch that nonetheless made her skin tingle. "Good night, Lucy. Good night." The week that followed was the most magical of Lucy's life. Xavier took time off work, something his assistant seemed shocked by based on the phone conversations Lucy overheard. They explored San Francisco like they were both tourists, visiting museums and parks, trying new restaurants, getting lost in different neighborhoods. But more than the places they went, Lucy treasured the conversations they had. They talked about everything, from their childhoods to their dreams for the future. Xavier told her about the pressure of running a business, about the loneliness of being constantly surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Lucy opened up about her own insecurities, about feeling like she was not living up to her potential, about the safety and monotony of her life in Tucson. "You're not giving yourself enough credit," Xavier said one evening as they walked along Ocean Beach, the sun setting over the Pacific. "You shape young minds for a living. You make a difference every single day. That's more than most people can say. But sometimes I wonder if I'm hiding. Teaching is safe. It's what I'm good at. But maybe I'm using it as an excuse not to take risks in other areas of my life." "Like what?" "Like this. Like you. A month ago, I never would have stayed in San Francisco to see where things went with someone I barely knew. I would have gone straight home and convinced myself it was just a nice moment that didn't mean anything." Xavier stopped walking and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "And now I'm terrified but also happier than I've been in a long time." He kissed her then, properly this time, and Lucy felt the world tilt on its axis. His lips were soft but sure, and she melted into him, her hands clutching his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you," he whispered. "I know it's too soon, and I know we live in different cities, but I can't help it." "I'm falling for you too," Lucy admitted, "which scares me to death. We'll figure it out. Whatever challenges come up, we'll figure them out together." As the week progressed, reality began to creep back in. Lucy's car was fixed, and she would need to return to Tucson soon. School started in 3 weeks, and she had preparations to make. The bubble they had been living in was starting to deflate. On their last night together, Xavier took her to his penthouse apartment in a luxury high-rise downtown. Lucy had known he was wealthy, but seeing where he lived drove home just how different their worlds were. The place was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, designer furniture, and art that probably cost more than her annual salary. "This is where you live?" Lucy asked, feeling overwhelmed. "Yeah. It's too big for one person, honestly. I bought it as an investment, but now I'm kind of stuck with it." She walked to the windows, taking in the breathtaking view. Xavier came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Come back," he said quietly. "What?" "Come back to San Francisco. Move here. I know it's a huge ask, and I know you have a life in Tucson, but I can't stand the thought of you leaving. These past few days have been the happiest I've had in years." Lucy turned in his arms to face him. "Xavier, I can't just move. I have a job, an apartment, a whole life. You could get a teaching job here. I have connections. I could help you find something. And you could stay here while you look for your own place, no strings attached. I just want to be near you to see where this goes without being hundreds of miles apart." "That's crazy." "Maybe. But this thing between us, it's special. You know it is. I'm not willing to let it go without a fight." Lucy's mind was racing. Everything he was saying was insane. You didn't uproot your entire life for someone you had known for a week. It was reckless and impulsive and completely unlike her. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But know that I'm serious about this. About you. They spent the rest of the evening on his couch, wrapped in each other's arms, not talking about the future or the looming separation. Lucy tried to memorize every detail, the way he smelled, the sound of his heartbeat, the warmth of his body against hers. The next morning, Xavier drove her back to her hotel to collect her things. Her car was parked outside, looking better than it had in years after the repairs. She loaded her bags into the trunk while Xavier watched, his expression carefully neutral. "So this is it," he said. "For now, I need to go home and figure things out. I understand." But she could see the disappointment in his eyes. Lucy stepped close to him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "Thank you for the most incredible week of my life. Whatever happens next, I'll never forget this." Xavier kissed her, slow and deep, pouring everything he felt into that single gesture. When they finally broke apart, Lucy had tears streaming down her face. "Drive safe," Xavier said, his voice rough with emotion. "Call me when you get home." "I will." She got in her car and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as Xavier grew smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. Only then did she let herself sob, pulling over to the side of the road because she could not see through her tears. The drive back to Tucson was the longest of her life. Lucy alternated between crying and trying to convince herself she had made the right decision. She barely knew Xavier. Moving to San Francisco would be crazy. She had a good job, friends, stability. She would be giving up everything for a man. But as the miles passed, she kept coming back to one undeniable truth. She had never felt about anyone the way she felt about Xavier. In 1 week, he had made her feel more alive, more herself than anyone ever had. Was she really going to let that go because it was scary? She arrived home late that night to her small apartment that suddenly felt even smaller. Everything looked exactly as she had left it, but Lucy felt like a completely different person. She called Xavier as promised, and they talked until she fell asleep with the phone still pressed to her ear. The next few days were torture. Lucy went through the motions of her life, meeting up with friends, preparing for the upcoming school year, but her heart was not in it. She thought about Xavier constantly, missed him with a physical ache. Emma came over 3 days after Lucy got back, took one look at her and said, "You need to go back." "I can't just leave." "Why not? What's really keeping you here? And don't say your job because we both know you could teach anywhere." "My life is here. My apartment, my friends, everything I know. Your life is wherever you choose to make it, and right now you're miserable. You found something special with Xavier and you're throwing it away because you're scared." "Of course I'm scared. What if I move there and it doesn't work out? What if I give up everything and end up alone in a city where I don't know anyone? What if you don't go and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been?" Emma countered. "That seems scarier to me." Lucy buried her face in her hands. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do. You're just too afraid to admit it." That night, Lucy lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Emma's words echoing in her mind. She thought about her life, about the careful, controlled existence she had built. It was safe and predictable and so boring. Xavier had shown her what life could be when she took risks, when she opened herself up to possibility. She picked up her phone and called him. He answered on the first ring. "Lucy, is everything okay?" "I'm coming back," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. "I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, and I'm probably insane, but I'm coming back. I want to see where this goes. I want to be with you." There was a long pause, and then Xavier's voice came through, thick with emotion. "Are you serious?" Completely terrified, but yes, serious. "God, Lucy." You have no idea how happy you just made me." They talked for hours, making plans. Xavier knew the principal at a highly regarded elementary school in San Francisco and promised to put in a word for her. Lucy would need to give notice at her current job, break her lease, figure out logistics. It would take at least a month to get everything sorted, but she was doing it. She was actually doing it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Lucy put in her notice at work, and while her principal was disappointed, she understood. She found someone to take over her apartment lease, packed up her belongings, said tearful goodbyes to friends who promised to visit. Through it all, Xavier was her constant support, calling her every day, helping however he could from a distance. The job at the San Francisco school came through, a position teaching first grade that would start at the beginning of the school year. Everything was falling into place in a way that felt almost magical. Finally, the day came. Lucy loaded up a moving truck with her most important possessions and began the drive north. This time, there were no breakdowns, no disasters. The journey was smooth and uneventful, as if the universe was finally on her side. Xavier met her at his building when she arrived, and the moment Lucy saw him, she knew she had made the right decision. He swept her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. "You're here," he said against her hair. "You're actually here." "I'm here," Lucy confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. He helped her unload her things into his apartment. Lucy had insisted on finding her own place, but Xavier had convinced her to stay with him at least temporarily while she got settled in the city. As they carried boxes inside, Lucy kept catching him looking at her with this expression of wonder, like he could not quite believe she was real. That first night, they ordered takeout and ate it sitting on the floor of his living room, surrounded by Lucy's boxes. It felt surreal and perfect all at once. "I still can't believe you're here," Xavier said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "When you drove away that day, I thought I'd lost you. You almost did. But I realized I'd rather take a risk on something real than play it safe and always wonder. I'm going to spend every day making sure you don't regret this." The transition was not always smooth. Lucy struggled with homesickness, missed her friends and the familiar routines of her old life. There were days when she questioned her decision, when the enormity of what she had done threatened to overwhelm her. But Xavier was patient and understanding, giving her space when she needed it and support when she asked for it. Starting at her new school helped. The students were wonderful, and Lucy quickly made friends with the other teachers. She began to build a life in San Francisco that was hers, not just an extension of Xavier's world. As summer turned to fall, Lucy and Xavier settled into a rhythm. They had their first real fight, a stupid argument about dishes that was really about learning to live together. They worked through it, learning how to communicate, how to compromise. Lucy found her own apartment nearby but ended up spending most nights at Xavier's place anyway. One evening in October, about 4 months after Lucy had moved to San Francisco, Xavier took her back to Ocean Beach where they had walked on one of their first dates. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "You remember what you said to me here?" Xavier asked as they walked along the shore. "I said a lot of things. You said you were terrified but happier than you'd been in a long time." Lucy smiled at the memory. "I was. I still am sometimes, honestly. This all happened so fast." Xavier stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I know it's only been a few months, and I know we're still figuring things out, but I need you to know something. I love you, Lucy. I'm completely, hopelessly in love with you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Tears welled up in Lucy's eyes. "I love you too, so much." He kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Lucy felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was supposed to be. With this man in this city building this life. "Move in with me," Xavier said when they broke apart. "Officially. Not just staying at my place most nights, but actually living together. Make it your home too. Are you sure? That's a big step. I've never been more sure of anything. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want to build a life with you, Lucy." "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll move in with you." The rest of that year passed in a blur of happiness. Lucy gave up her apartment and officially moved into Xavier's penthouse, slowly adding her touches to make it feel like their space rather than just his. They hosted dinner parties, took weekend trips up the coast, built traditions and inside jokes. Lucy's friends from Tucson came to visit and were charmed by Xavier, finally understanding why she had taken such a huge leap. For Christmas, Xavier flew Lucy's parents out to San Francisco. She had been nervous about them meeting him, worried they would judge the whirlwind nature of their relationship. But Xavier won them over within minutes, his genuine warmth and obvious devotion to their daughter melting any reservations they might have had. "He's a good man," her father said to her privately, "and he looks at you like you hung the moon." As the calendar turned to a new year, Lucy reflected on how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been playing it safe, convinced that her small, predictable life was enough. Now she was living in a new city, in love with an incredible man, taking risks and embracing adventure. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. One evening in February, almost exactly a year after her car had broken down on that lonely stretch of highway, Xavier came home from work with a strange expression on his face. "What's wrong?" Lucy asked, looking up from the essays she was grading at the kitchen table. "Nothing's wrong." "The opposite, actually." He pulled an envelope from his briefcase. "I have something for you." Lucy opened it to find 2 plane tickets to Paris. "Xavier, what is this? We're going to Paris for a week in March. I've already cleared it with your principal." "You cannot just buy plane tickets without asking me." "I know, and I'm sorry for the presumption. But Lucy, you've given up so much to be here with me. You left your home, your job, everything you knew. I want to give you something in return. I want to take you to Paris. I want to show you the world." Lucy felt tears prick her eyes. "You don't have to do that. I didn't move here expecting grand gestures." "I know, but I want to anyway. Let me do this. Let me spoil you a little," she laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Paris was magical. They spent their days wandering through museums, eating pastries at sidewalk cafes, and getting lost in winding streets. Xavier was the perfect travel companion, enthusiastic and spontaneous, happy to follow whatever whim struck them. On their last night, he took her to dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Seine. They had champagne and incredible food, and Lucy felt like she was living in a dream. After dinner, Xavier suggested a walk along the river. The Eiffel Tower glittered in the distance, and the air was crisp but not cold. Xavier led her to a quiet spot and turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "Lucy, a year ago I was driving home from Vegas feeling empty and disconnected from my own life. Then I saw you standing on the side of the road and everything changed. You walked into my life and turned it completely upside down in the best possible way." He dropped to one knee and Lucy's breath caught in her throat. "You make me laugh every day. You challenge me to be better. You see me, not my money or my success, just me. And I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Lucy Henderson, will you marry me?" Lucy was crying, her hands shaking as she nodded. "Yes, yes, of course I'll marry you." Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply. Around them, other people began to clap and cheer, but Lucy barely noticed. She was too focused on the man in front of her, the man who had somehow become her entire world. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too. Always." The wedding took place that fall in San Francisco, a small, intimate ceremony with just close friends and family. Emma was Lucy's maid of honor, and she spent the entire day saying "I told you so" with her eyes. Lucy wore a simple lace dress and carried wildflowers, and when she walked down the aisle toward Xavier, she had never been more certain of anything. Xavier cried when he saw her, not bothering to hide his tears. His vows were beautiful and heartfelt, promising to support her dreams, to adventure with her, to love her through every season of life. Lucy's vows were simpler. "A year and a half ago, my car broke down, and I thought it was the worst day of my life. Turns out, it was the best. You were exactly what I didn't know I needed. You pushed me to take risks, to dream bigger, to believe I deserved more than just safe and comfortable. I promise to keep taking those risks with you, to keep dreaming, to love you fiercely for the rest of my life." Their life together settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lucy thrived at her school, becoming known as one of the most dedicated and creative teachers. Xavier continued to grow his hotel business, but he made sure to prioritize time with Lucy, never letting work consume him the way it had before they met. They bought a house in Pacific Heights with a big backyard, talking about filling it with children someday. They traveled when they could, exploring new places and creating memories. They had disagreements and hard days, but they always came back to each other, to the foundation of love and respect they had built. 2 years after their wedding, Lucy discovered she was pregnant. Xavier was over the moon, immediately starting to plan and prepare, reading every parenting book he could find. When their daughter was born, they named her Grace, and Xavier held her with such tenderness that Lucy fell in love with him all over again. Grace was followed 2 years later by a son they named Daniel. Their house filled with laughter and chaos, with crayon drawings on the walls and toys scattered across every surface. Xavier proved to be an incredibly hands-on father, changing diapers and doing middle-of-the-night feedings without complaint. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they returned to that spot on Ocean Beach, where Xavier had first told Lucy he loved her. The kids were with Xavier's parents for the night, giving them a rare evening alone. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked as they walked hand in hand along the shore. "Giving up your old life, taking such a huge risk?" Lucy thought about the question seriously. She thought about her small apartment in Tucson, her predictable routine, the safe but ultimately unfulfilling life she had been living. Then she looked at the man beside her, at the life they had built together, at the family they had created. "Not for a single second," she said. "Best decision I ever made." Xavier pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Mine too. That day I saw you on the side of the road, I almost drove past. I was tired, I wanted to get home, and stopping seemed like an inconvenience. But something made me pull over. Best impulse I ever followed." "Fate," Lucy said. "Maybe. Or maybe just luck. Either way, I'm grateful." They stood there as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, and Lucy marveled at how one broken-down car had led to all of this. She had been terrified that day, stranded and alone. She had been scared to accept a ride from a stranger. She had been afraid to stay in San Francisco, to uproot her life, to take a chance on love. But she had done it anyway. She had been brave, and it had changed everything. Years continued to pass, filled with school plays and family vacations, with quiet evenings at home and adventures to new places. Grace and Daniel grew, becoming kind and curious children who inherited their father's generosity and their mother's warmth. Lucy eventually became a principal herself, leading her school with the same dedication she had brought to her classroom. Xavier handed over day-to-day operations of his hotels to a management team, stepping back to spend more time with his family. He never regretted the decision, treasuring the extra hours with Lucy and the kids, the chance to be present for all the small moments that made up a life. On their 10th anniversary, they renewed their vows on that same stretch of highway where Lucy's car had broken down all those years ago. It was a quiet ceremony with just their families and closest friends. Grace and Daniel stood beside them, now old enough to understand the significance of the spot. 10 years ago, I was terrified, Lucy said in her vows. Terrified of being stranded, terrified of accepting help from a stranger, terrified of the feelings you brought out in me. But you taught me that the best things in life exist on the other side of fear. Thank you for being my safe place to land, even as you push me to keep taking flight. Xavier's voice was thick with emotion as he responded. You were the best surprise of my life. The best accident, the best detour, the best unexpected journey. Every day with you is an adventure, and I can't wait to see where the road takes us next. As they drove away from the ceremony, Lucy looked at the spot where her car had died all those years ago. It seemed so ordinary now, just another stretch of highway. But for her, it would always be magical, the place where her real life had begun. She reached over and took Xavier's hand, feeling the familiar warmth of his palm against hers. Their kids were chatting happily in the backseat, planning what they wanted for dinner. It was such a simple moment, so ordinary and yet so precious. This was what happiness looked like, Lucy thought. Not grand gestures or fairy tale moments, though there had been plenty of those. No, real happiness was this: sitting in a car with the people you loved most, heading toward home, knowing that wherever you went together, you would be okay. Xavier glanced over at her and smiled, that same smile that had made her heart skip a beat in a diner all those years ago. Some things never changed. What are you thinking about? He asked. Just how lucky I am. How lucky we are. The luckiest, he agreed, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. They drove toward the sunset, toward home, toward whatever adventures still awaited them. The road stretched out ahead, full of possibility, and Lucy was no longer afraid. She had learned that the best destinations were the ones you never planned for, the ones you found by accident when your car broke down and a stranger stopped to help. She had found love on the side of a highway, had built a life from a chance encounter, had discovered that sometimes the worst moments led to the very best outcomes. And she would not change a single thing, not one moment of the journey that had brought her here, to this car with this man, building this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Lucy leaned her head on Xavier's shoulder, content and complete. This was her happily ever after, and it was even better than she ever could have imagined.